Hello, my friends, and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George, and today I have another installment of underrated albums for you. Another album that I feel doesn't get the love and appreciation that it deserves. So, today's album in question comes from none other than UK. I think they're actually from Merseyside, Liverpool, but I'm going to say UK based extreme metal giants. They are one of the true kings of the underground. They are one of those bands that have inspired and motivated so many young bands and musicians into creating some of the most renowned and up-to-date releases in our extreme world. But they're one of those bands that are just undisputably legends. Not a bad album in their catalogue, in my opinion, but their release from 1996, I believe, often is cited as being their weakest release. And also, it's quite a diversive piece because it sees the band transitioning from being an outright death metal band to almost being a death and roll band. But I think that Carcass 1996 Swansong's album is an absolutely fine album. This is an album that I really enjoy. I'm not going to say that it's my favourite Carcass album because it most certainly is not. However, I do feel that this album is a solid, start to finish, just a great listen. Yes, I would say that it's a death metal album. I would say that it's a melodic death metal album. It's very traditional in its stylisms. It's very death and roll. But I would say that these songs are of top-notch quality. It's very well composed. It's a well-written, well-structured album. To give you a little bit of history, of my history with this album, of course I'm showing you the booklet of the CD format there. But I do also have this little article here. Now this is, if you're not familiar, this is the cassette version of the album. Now I bought this, and I think it must have been about 10 years ago when, if you're not from the UK, then you may not be aware that you can learn to drive at the age of 17. Now my first car was a little old Nissan Micra. Now this particular car, my first car, my little steed, was it was totally outdated, outclassed, of course, but it had a radio, which is no good to a fan of heavy metal, but it did have a cassette deck. So I then made it my mission to find some cassettes, and I managed to find 4 tapes altogether. One of them being Carcass Swansongs. Now I listen to this album pretty much every day, or at least 6 or 7 times a week, while driving myself to sixth form college and back. I know this album inside out. I absolutely loved it. It's just, to me, this is so nostalgic because it takes me back to then. Of course, that was however many years, nearly probably 20 years after its release. But you know what? I think it's a damn fine album. And the reason why I think it's a damn fine album is because the quality of some of these songs is undisputable. So now that I have actually gone and listened to it on CD, because I've had this CD for X amount of years, probably not that long after I bought this, the tape version, but because I was listening to it every day, I didn't often have a need to listen to the CD as well. But the strength of those couple of opening tracks there, we've got Keep On Rotting, In the Free World, into Tomorrow Belongs to Nobody. Those are undisputable death and roll classics. Brilliant tracks, plenty of melody, plenty of groove, fantastic stuff. Musicianship is so tight with these guys, and it's important to note, of course, that you do have the stable, reliable backbone of the band with Bill Steer on guitars, and you have Jeff Walker on bass and vocals. You still had the great Ken Owen on drums then. Of course, he following a tragic accident, he has not been participating with the band for their sort of reunion material. But then you had, at this stage, you had Carlo Regadus on guitars as well. So succeeding Michael Amott, of course, on guitars. But great musicians. All great. There's certainly no fault there at all. And those are a couple of brilliant tracks opening up the album. Then you've got Black Star. Some seriously heavy, groovy riffing. Seriously crunchy stuff. Absolutely crushing. Very much reminds me of the Heartwork album, which was, of course, the album before this. And I think there's a lot of fallout of Heartwork on this album. And Heartwork is easily one of the best, probably the best 2 Carcass albums, in my opinion anyway. So an influence of Heartwork on Swansongs is no bad thing in my opinion. Elsewhere, because I'm not going to go through the minutest details of every track, but elsewhere we have Cross My Heart, another absolutely cracking track. So much melody, so much groove. It's got such a great rhythm that you can get along with. It's just brilliant. Room 101, slower paced, heavy, it's groovy, the riffs are thick, it's brilliant. Polarized is probably one of the heaviest songs on the album, more akin to the sort of material that we were getting on Heartwork. A brilliant track, a truly fantastic track. Carcass in full strength, brilliant stuff. Generation Hexed, again, another heavy track, as is Firm Hand, also, along with Polarized, probably the heaviest couple of tracks on the album. Then we get Rock the Vote. Now these are interesting because throughout this album there's flares, if you like, of sort of classic Sabbath and more upfront rock and roll, and not just in terms of its stylisms, but just the heavy in terms of its heaviness. And it really works. It really, really works for these guys. And again, Rock the Vote, that has that sort of attribute. Don't Believe a Word, another really heavy moment before Go to Hell, which is just a groovy, melodic death and roll masterpiece. I would honestly say that start to finish, this is one of those albums that I think you need to stick with it. You need to give it a chance. Certainly if you're coming from listening to albums like Symphonies of Sickness or Heartwork or even Torn Arteries, their latest album, you've got to give it a chance because it's not necessarily immediately apparent what this album is all about. It's not immediately apparent just how good some of the material contained within this album is. Yes, it does sound different, but it is a criminally underrated album because you've got some brilliant material here. So if you're a Carcass fan, no doubt you would have seen past the kind of the press negativity, and you would have delved into this album and appreciate it for what it is, a damn fine Carcass album. But if you're not familiar with Carcass, I probably wouldn't necessarily say start here. I would say start with an album like Surgical Steel or Heartwork. But this is a damn fine album nonetheless. Personal highlights for me, I'm going to say Black Star, I'm going to say Polarized, and I'm probably also going to say Don't Believe a Word. Those are my personal highlights, but to be honest, start to finish, this is a really rock solid album. Even on its analog form, I love it. I think it's a fantastic album, and I really don't understand how so many people really do crap all over this album. It's a great album. It's a great album. I know that they probably don't play too many of these tracks live too frequently, but that wasn't too many years ago that I read that they had included, I think it was Black Star and something else, it may have been Rock the Vote, in their live set. Testament to the fact that actually this material, this is easily enjoyable, easily palatable death and roll, melodic death metal. So if you're not familiar with Carcass, as I say, check out Heartwork and then work your way onto this. If you are a fan, give it another chance because this is a damn fine album. Carcass, Swansong's an underrated album in my opinion. What do you think of this album? Are you a fan? Do you also feel that it's an underrated masterpiece? Or, polarizingly, do you feel that it's just not worth it? That it's not a good album? I'll be very interested to hear other people's thoughts and opinions on this album. But thank you very much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe as always, and do check back soon for more reviews and recommendations of all things good and heavy. Take care, my friends. Stay heavy.